So last week, I reviewed Wampum, a game that originally started as an homage to the journey of the West in the Western markets, and then got changed around to something more, shall we say, Americanized for us. This week, I stick with the Journey to the West lore, but this time play a game that takes a little bit more inspiration from that source material in all markets. Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. It's a game developed by Ninja Theory, so you know it's probably gonna be good. In Enslaved, you play as a massive hulk of a man tasked with escorting his young female cohort to her home after being rescued from a slaver ship. The girl, named Trip, decided to take her upon herself to use the slaver crown on the man and coerce him to assist her, promising to release him from captivity once she gets back to her tribe. If he doesn't, well, she triggers a lethal reaction from that slave caller, killing him instantly. This crown is a big thing in the game, as it gives reason to show a HUD, objective markers, and even upgrades. Trip uses the crown to monitor everything, and uses it to communicate when there is a small but non-lethal distance between the two. Enslaved is your normal third-person action game, and as it is the requisite nowadays, there's plenty of climbing to be done. Because of this, you might not be surprised to learn that the massive brick of a man is named Monkey. It's obvious why after you see his climbing and jumping movements. He has a certain grace to his moves that make it almost hypnotic while leaping around from pole to pole. And you're going to want to get used to that clambering, because it happens frequently. There's a lot more platforming than there is combat in the game, but thankfully, handholds that you can climb will be highlighted by flashing objects. Granted, I still found a few areas where I had to run in circles a few times to figure out what I was missing, but this was a nice change of pace. In addition, you cannot fall off of any objects that you're not meant to fall off of. This means you can't accidentally leap from a pole to your death because that one railing a little ways off looked like a secret area meant to be explored. I'm looking at you, Uncharted. Great games and all, but way too many times I did a leap to completely miss my target and fall to my doom. So combat. How does that work? Well, from the start of the game, when you're trapped in the slaver ship, you're given a tutorial on how to fight the opposing mechs. That's right, there's only hostile robots that will strike you, no humans. Monkey procures his bow staff, to which you have a button for normal, quick strikes, and one for the hard-hitting but slower power strikes. Combat can be considered repetitive, as there's really not any kind of special combos that you can do. It's just weaker or stronger attacks and no mixing the two. You keep pressing the weak attack to do the closest thing to a combination attack that the game has, and if you press the strong button, Monkey will do a 2-hit move. There's also a special finishing move that Monkey can do if you purchase the upgrade in the XP shop, in which Monkey will be able to do some devastating damage. In order to do this, you just need to get a bunch of strikes in without taking damage, then push 2 specific keys at the same time. I wish I used this in my first playthrough of the game, as it does shorten some of the boss battles. Speaking of finishing moves, when Monkey clears out the last of the mechs, it'll usually zoom in on that final blow and show the amount of effort that Monkey is putting into that hit. It's actually kind of funny sometimes to see the exaggerated expression on his face, but even so, it's cool to see that along with the mech getting chopped in half. If you get struck, there's 2 different systems to keep an eye on. You have your standard life bar, which can be healed automatically over time or by medkits you can pick up. You also have a shield, which also regenerates much faster than your life bar. The shield is used more noticeably when taking bullet damage, and it activates automatically while being struck by an assaulting turret. You can also bring up the shield to avoid immediate life damage, so if you see a mech about to hit you with a physical blow, you can protect yourself. I should talk about the XP shop quick. As you're playing, you'll find red orbs both laying around in the open, and also get them from defeated enemies. Now, I found out that I was essentially playing this game in New Game Plus for this review, so I didn't get a lot of footage of the shop and work. My bad. But just know that it increases your life, shields, recovery rates. You know, this stuff you see all the time nowadays. There's one other gameplay mechanic I need to talk about before moving on. The ranged attacks. Monkey has access to a long-distance shot from his staff, and there's 2 different ammo types as well, plasma and stun. Stun is pretty obvious in that it paralyzes the mechs, allowing for some easy combat. The plasma ammo does more direct damage and is occasionally needed for some puzzles, such as knocking down signs to be able to climb from objects behind them, or blowing apart couplings to unlatch a giant war mech. Of course, you can also shoot it at those pesky robots that are shooting you from afar, but that was pretty obvious, isn't it? The 2 range types aren't needed a lot, but they are available in those times where you just need a bit more oomph in your combat. Finally, there's one main gripe I have about the combat, and it partially deals with the camera too. It just feels clunky. There were a few times where the camera was practically bouncing into the wall, so I couldn't see the battle clearly. Also, there is no lock-on system, so there were times I was struggling to fight the opposing robots. It's not something that kills the fun of the game, but it is something that you may notice every now and then. So that's the gameplay, so what else is there to talk about? Well, I did want to talk about the atmosphere a bit. This isn't your typical post-apocalyptic game. No, it's incredibly lush and colorful, making it feel like nature was taking over again. It's obvious at times that the game takes place in a future New York City, at least at first. It probably shifts to different areas later in the game, but at least for the first few chapters, you're climbing from wrecked skyscrapers. It's interesting because this is something revisited 4 years later in Horizon Zero Dawn, being that Enslaved was released in 2013 and Horizon Zero Dawn in 2017. And the whole humans living in tribes and fighting mech story is practically identical in both games. Of course, Horizon fleshes the whole how this happened story out a bit more, but Enslaved still paints a perfect portrait of a world that fell apart. Makes you wonder why it happened. Who knows? Maybe both these games take place in the same world but two different parts of the US. That'd be kinda cool. One other thing is that the game doesn't overstay its welcome. There's a little over a dozen chapters, and each takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to complete. It may sound short, but with the somewhat repetitive combat and the lack of mech variety, it's actually preferred in my eyes to have it a bit on the shorter side. Then again, I don't know why I'm calling a roughly 5 to 6 hour game short, as I feel like for the most part that's the average length of a game nowadays. Yeah well, that's Enslaved Odyssey to the West for you. It's one of those games I feel needs more recognition, because although the game's battles can feel mediocre at times, the bright world and great story more than make up for it. The fact that you can't accidentally fall to your death while climbing gets the game some bonus points too. If you're looking for an unsung gem to play for the weekend, you should look no further than Enslaved. It may not break any molds, but it's still a fun romp anyway. Final score? 6 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.